Sasha, use your words.
She's like, I want Mom to let me out.
I know. Go with Aunt Susan.
Come on. Hey, it's Sue.
And Megan, the Spine Breakers. And today we are bringing you part 2 of our July reading wrap-up.
Yes.
So our final totals for July were we each read 13 books.
Yep.
And while we do this,
We are drinking this beer called Fuck COVID.
because fuck COVID.
Yes. It also says, also hoarders.
Also hoarders, yeah.
Which I'm sure it means COVID hoarders.
Yeah, like toilet paper
Yeah.
hoarders and...
But
So-
this is from Ale Asylum,
Which is, where did we say that was?
Madison, Wisconsin.
Wisconsin.
And it's a hazy pale ale. Did we say that?
We did not.
So there's a lot of flies in here. So if you
There's so many, and I don't know why.
if you see or hear them,
It's a fly. Yeah, I don't know what's going on, but cheers.
Cheers.
It's not bad.
It's not bad. It's a little. It has that like almost gluish flavor that pale ales sometimes have that
It
I
does.
don't care for. But it's not. It's not terrible.
It's not terrible. It's not bad.
They also have a Pilsner version of this. This is Fuck COVID 2.0, which is the hazy pale. And then I don't care for Pilsners, so I got the pale. But anyway, if you want to see part 1 of our wrap up, then I'll link it below. But this is part 2.
This is part 2.
And it's the rest of our books we read for Tome Infinity and Beyond.
And for Fuckathon.
Which I just realized I forgot to bring my sheet that has all my challenges on it. So I don't know if I can tell you what challenges I
have
got
mine.
for.
I'm sure.
I could take a guess. So the first book I have to talk about is Story of Your Life by Ted Chiang. And I only read, this is a collection of his short stories. I only read Story of Your Life, which I believe was originally published as a novella. Okay, so this is about a woman who doesn't see time as linear, and she's telling the story of her daughter's life while also simultaneously telling the story of her. She's basically hired to try to figure out the language of these aliens that have landed on Earth, and so she's trying to communicate with them and figure out why they're here.
Right.
And I really loved it. Like, it's a great story. It's very heart-wrenching. Yeah, and the movie Arrival is based on this story. I haven't seen that movie, but I would like to.
I've seen it. It's really good.
Yeah, I've heard it's really good. So, yeah, I mean, I would definitely recommend. It's not super long. It's under 100 pages for sure. So, it's really
It's a
great.
quick read, yeah.
Yeah. And I counted it, I'm trying to remember what I counted for. I know I counted it for Tome Infinity and Beyond, read a novella, and read a book that a host rated 5 stars because Steph from Novelty Corner gave that story 5 stars. I might have also counted it for read a book with extraterrestrials, and I didn't count it for anything for Fuckathon, I don't think.
So the first book I'm going to talk about is The Book of Phoenix by Nnedi Okorafor. This is a prequel to Who Fears Death. And after I read Who Fears Death, I loved that book. I rated it 5 stars, and I wanted to read more of that series and more by Nnedi Okorafor, so I read this. I give this 4 out of 5 stars. This is about a woman who is imprisoned in this tower, and they do like experiments on her, and she has all these powers, and she ends up breaking out of there. And so if you know about Who Fears Death, you know it is a post-nuclear disaster book, and this is the prequel. So this kind of alludes to how that happened. And the way I described this is like a better version of X-Men. It's kind of like an African mythological version of X-Men, and it was like way cooler. But no, it was so good. Like, I loved it. I love this series. I'll keep reading it. But so I counted this for Tome Infinity for read a book with fire in the name or on the cover, and that's it.
The next book I read was Red Dragon by Thomas Harris. And this is the first book in the Hannibal Lecter series. And it's about this man, what was his name? Graham. Will? I think Will Graham. But he has been like out of the game, the detective crime solving game for a little while, and then this other detective who he'd worked with before is like, we need you to come help with this case. And so they're trying to find, they call this killer the Tooth Fairy, or he eventually becomes known as Red Dragon. But yeah, he basically just kills whole families.
Oh.
And like mutilates the wives. Very disturbing. Yeah, and Hannibal Lecter is not in this book a whole lot, but he does like consult with him on like what this man's next move might be, what this killer's next move might be. Mm-hmm. So he's like, you're a psychopath, he's a psychopath, you know. I thought this book was like alright. Like, okay. It was compelling. I read it really quickly. But it was kind of weird because it seems like it's a sequel. Right. Because, like, it seems like it should be the sequel to the story of him catching Hannibal Lecter. Okay. But it's not. They just reference him catching Hannibal Lecter in the past.
That's weird.
But this is the first book in the series, so it's kind of strange.
That is weird.
You know, it's kind of your typical, like, crime novel, in my opinion.
There.
But yeah, it wasn't bad. I think I gave it 3 stars. And I didn't count it for any of these challenges because I actually had read this for Reading Rush. But we're not going to talk about that right now.
We're not going to talk about that right now. So the next book that I finished, I don't have a physical copy of because I read it on my Kindle, is The Calculating Stars by Mary Robinette Kowal, which is the story of a female computer. Like they call them computers, like she does math, she does the numbers for like rocket launches and stuff. It takes place in the 50s. There's this catastrophic event that happens while she and her husband are vacationing. He is an engineer, like a rocket engineer. And so they end up getting involved in this plan to try to come up with a solution to this catastrophic event that happened. And so because it's in the 50s, she was a pilot, I guess, in World War II, so she's an excellent pilot. She's an excellent mathematician. And so she, since it's the 50s, is kind of constantly fighting for a place at the table. Plus there's like they're looking for astronauts to go into space. And so she knows some like really good female pilots, and she knows some really good black female pilots, and so she's trying to get them a chance, and they're trying to get a chance to like be considered for, an astronaut position. But I've heard that it's reminiscent of Hidden Figures. Okay. But I've not read or seen Hidden Figures, so I don't know that for sure, but that's what I've heard. I really liked it. I thought it was it was kind of a fun read. I liked the main character. She was pretty fucking badass, despite the fact that she had like paralyzing anxiety to the point like when she would speak in front of people, she would vomit. Oh. Like not in front of people, but like before and then after she would throw up. Yeah. So like, but she was still a pretty big badass. The relationship she had with her husband was like super positive and like for the 50s. Very progressive. He was super supportive of her and of her career. So yeah, it was a good book. So I read that for a book that a host rated 5 stars for Tome Infinity, because Megan of Tome Infinity, formerly of her last channel name was Meg's Infinite Book List, yes. But now you might have noticed that her channel's gone. Her channel's gone. She's doing a podcast. Yeah. So yeah, that was a book that she had rated 5 stars, and I can see why she did. I gave it 4 stars, but I did really enjoy it, and I probably will continue with that series. So I liked it a lot. The next book I read was Gateway by Frederik Pohl, and Frederik Pohl's pretty big name in like vintage sci-fi, and this is the first book I read by him. I also think it was like one of his most
decorated novels, I
Oh.
guess. This won a lot of awards. But it's about this man who, like, from the beginning of the book, you know that he's, like, filthy rich. And he's
Ooh.
in therapy, and his therapist is an AI. And he's working through this trauma he went through on Gateway, which Gateway is this structure that was left behind by an alien race that they call the Hichi. And by the time humans discovered Gateway, the Hichi were long gone. Nobody knows what happened to them. But they left this behind, and it had all these ships there, and they're like preset to go certain routes. And humans, like, we couldn't figure out how to change that or anything. So basically you can buy a ticket to go to Gateway, and then you can sign up to go on one of these ships, and then it's just a gamble. You hope for the best. And you could potentially become very rich, because if you find artifacts or just any valuable materials and bring them back, they'll give you, like, royalties and, like, just tons of money. Which we know that this has happened to the main character. So we're kind of, like, getting that story of, like, how he got to where he is. But also we know that, like, something happened there involving a woman named Clara, who he was, like, in love with, and he feels very guilty about whatever happened to Clara. Yeah, I didn't know how to feel about this book. It's like, this dude is like a fucking roller coaster, man. First of all, like, the book was published in the 70s, and it's written by presumably a straight white man. I know he's white. I'm not sure if he was straight or not.
Don't know if he's straight, right, but yeah.
So, you know, I wasn't expecting much diversity or anything like that, but I feel like there was more than I expected.
Yeah.
So it's like, on the one hand, it was kind of better, because there is, like, gay and bisexual characters.
Which is good.
They're side characters. They're not main. Well, actually, the main character kind of turns out to be bisexual, but
Right.
there are gay and bisexual characters, and there's, like, mentions that, like, people of color are around, at least, and that it's not, like, they're not discriminated against or anything.
Okay, so they exist, and it's kind of an equal society.
Yeah.
Okay.
Also, the women in the novel are, like, they're, like, pretty strong, independent women, like, depicted fairly well.
Okay.
However, our main character, Bob, or Rob, he goes by, like, 14 different names. I'll call him Bob. Bob, he's every woman in this book Bob has sex with. Like, there's not a woman in this book that Bob does not sleep with. So there's that. Not necessarily a bad thing, but it's like, you couldn't have a female character that he didn't fuck.
That you didn't?
And then also there's a part where he and Clara get into an argument, and she hits him once, and then he beats the shit out of her. Like, beats the fuck out of her in front of a child, by the way. There's a child present.
Oh, man.
And I'm just like, Bob!
Not a good look,
What
Bob.
the fuck, Bob?
No.
And so there was just, like, so many ups and downs of, like, oh, Bob seems like a decent guy. Oh, shit, Bob.
Bob is not a good dude.
Maybe Bob's okay. Oh, no,
okay.
Bob. So it's like, by the end of the book, I was like, this man is terrible. But yet, we're obviously supposed to give a fuck about him because, you know, he's the whole
protagonist.
point of the story.
Right.
But then it's like, the story of, like, these ships, and, like, it makes you think that they're gonna find the Hichi, but they don't. So I feel like maybe, because this is the first book in a series, so I'm like, maybe they find the Hichi in a later book. And also, like, what happens to Clara is interesting. It's not exactly a conclusive thing.
Like a clear cut.
So I feel like that, so it's like, I almost want to read the second book.
Yeah, just to see, like, what the fuck.
Yeah, even though, like, I gave this 2.5 stars, it wasn't great. But it's just, I don't know,
It sounds intriguing, at least.
And I just had such mixed emotions about it. And there's also another thing, I won't go into this now, because I could talk about this book for a while, but I did count it for one of my if you gotta read it challenges.
So we'll probably talk about it
So we will
more,
do a video
yeah.
where I talk about this book in more depth if you want to hear some of the other fucked up shit that's in it.
God.
But, yeah, it was just, it was all over the place. So 2.5 stars, and I counted it. Oh shit, I don't remember what I know I counted it for Fuckathon for fuck capitalism, because this was very much a capitalistic. It was like what people mean when they say late term capitalism.
Like risk your life
sure.
for money. Yeah.
And then I counted it for a book with fire on the cover, because there's like fire coming out of the rockets.
Rocket blast.
And I feel like I counted it for one other, but I can't remember what it was now.
The next book that I am going to talk about is Cold Mountain by Charles Frazier. I've had this for a while. I've been meaning to read it for a while because I do really like this movie. So this is a book that takes place in the Civil War in this like mountain town in, I think it's North Carolina.
Was that part of the book?
No, that was in the book when I bought it.
Oh,
it's an article about Cold Mountain.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah. Yeah, it's one of the Carolinas. I think it's North Carolina. And it's about this couple, or they're not really a couple, it's about this man and this woman. The man goes to fight in the war. The woman is stuck in the town, and it's about each of their trials and tribulations during the war. I was excited to read this because I do really love the movie. Like, I think the movie, well, I say love. I like the movie. It's a hard movie to love because it's like heartbreaking. And there's some like terrible shit in there. But so I was super underwhelmed by this book. And I think like, so it's one of those books where the man and the woman are supposed to be in love, right? But they've had hardly any interaction with each other. And then also like the interactions they did have were not particularly pleasant for the most part. They both seem kind of indifferent to each other in the book. Like the woman, Ada, literally writes him 3 letters over the course of a few years and is kind of like, and he is kind of like, well, if Ada will have me, I'll go back to her, and if not, I'll go somewhere else. So it's like they're kind of indifferent to each other. So I wasn't really, and that's part of what in the movie that really captured me was they didn't have a ton of interaction before he went off to war in the movie either, but it was more charged. Like it was more romantic, I guess. Whereas in the book, it's not so much. So that was like really underwhelming. I also felt like the characters weren't super developed in the book. Like they were just kind of like blank slates upon which the writer could show you the misery of the Civil War, you know? So like I didn't really feel like the characters were super developed. Yeah, I mean, and of course, obviously there's like references to slavery and like there's the N-word a couple times, and like I didn't feel like it was really necessary. Like I understand it's a Civil War, but like it's about 2 white characters who are, neither of them own slaves, and like neither of them have anything really to do with slavery. So like why you gotta put the N-word in there?
Yeah.
But I will say about like book to movie, the movie added in like a couple of like weird sexual scenes. One of which was a rape scene, which is not in the book. So I didn't like that the movie added in like gratuitous rape, you know, for like apparently no reason because it's not in the source material.
Right.
But yeah, so I was just like, the writing in it was like pretty flowery, which I guess like some people would be like, oh, the writing's so beautiful, but it's beautiful with no points, I guess. And the characters were not well developed, which is a big thing for me because I like really character driven books. So I gave it 3 out of 5 stars. It was fine, I guess.
So the next book I read was The Deep by Rivers Solomon. Oh, I almost dropped it. With David Diggs, William Hudson, and Jonathan Snipes. And this is about this community of Mer people who are descendant of pregnant women who were thrown off of slave ships when they like gave birth in the ocean, and these children survived and evolved into this merfolk. And you're following one character specifically who she's kind of like the memory keeper of they're people, and so she keeps all these memories of like where they came from, and of course that's like all very traumatic, and she's having a hard time dealing with it. So I ended up like really loving this. I just thought the story was really beautiful and
so good.
Like, gave
it's
me
so
all the
good.
feels. And I will say that like the ending reminded me of one of my favorite movies, which is Splash with Tom Hanks and Daryl Hannah. So that really hit me hard. But yeah, it's just like
so good.
It's just a really good story, a beautiful story, and I loved it. I gave it 5 stars.
It's so
like,
good.
Heartbreaking, but also like uplifting in the end.
Yeah. Like it ends on a good, uplifting tone. But yeah, it says a lot about like, you know, cultural trauma and cultural grief, and it's a beautiful story.
Yeah.
So the next book I'm going to talk about, which I don't have a physical copy because I listened to it, is The Living Blood by Tananarive. This is the second book in the African Immortal series, which is fucking fire. Like, if you guys have not read it, it's so good. Like, it's fucking fire. Tananarive is brilliant, and this series is brilliant. So in this book, it's a sequel, so like I don't ever know how to talk about sequels without spoiling it, but it delves a little bit deeper into the society of African immortals, like the original, I think it's like 26 or 36 men, I'm not sure, I can't remember how many exactly, but the original colony of men. So you actually get to visit their colony in Africa, in Lalibela, learn a little bit more about them and their creation, and then the characters from the first novel obviously kind of continue their story. So that's all I can say without spoiling it. But I will say, like, I am hooked on this series. It is so good. It does kind of give me like Interview with the Vampire type vibes, but better, like infinitely better. Like, it's actually well written. And it's just...
Ooh, burn, Anne Rice.
Sorry, Anne Rice. But also, like, the characters are so much more interesting. The storyline is so much better. But I definitely can see that vibe in it. But yeah, it was really good. I loved it. I bought the entire series on hard copies of the entire series, which I guess I could have gotten my hard copy of this because I own it, but whatever.
I'll put a picture in.
But yeah, so I would highly recommend this. I would also highly recommend just reading anything by Tananarive because she's incredible.
I really want to read some of her.
So I counted The Living Blood for a book over 500 pages for Tome Infinity. And then I counted it for Fuck Ageism for Fuckathon because there's a character in it who is over 500 years old. So I gave it 4 to 5 stars. I love it. Love the series.
Alright, so the last book that I read in July was Mumbo Jumbo by Ishmael Reed. And this is set in the 20s and the 1920s, obviously.
Right, not the 2020s.
Right. I'm gonna be honest, I feel like this book was a little bit over my head. Like, I didn't fully understand what was going on some of the time. But from what I could tell, it's about, like, they call it a plague that's sweeping the nation and even becoming like a pandemic.
Ooh.
They call it Just Grew, and it is a plague that makes you dance. And basically it's kind of a representation of like black culture, so it's like, you know, specifically like ragtime and jazz, and also like black art in general, and also like polytheism. So you have these characters, like black characters, who are, one of them is like a voodoo priest. I don't know if they call him a priest, but he does like voodoo stuff. And he's like kind of trying to help Just Grew spread even more. But then you have this, I think it's called like the Wallflower Order or something like that. And it's these white people, white men, who are trying to stop the spread of Jet's crew. And yeah, it was really interesting. Like, for me, I just feel like there was a lot of references to things that I didn't quite understand. But I don't know if that's just because of me being ignorant, or if it's because this was published in the 70s and maybe they're like not things that are
before our time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I really enjoyed his writing. It kind of, like, his writing style kind of reminded me of David Foster Wallace, so I don't know if maybe David Foster Wallace was like inspired by Ishmael Reed at all, but kind of gave me that vibe. And yeah, I mean, and there's like, every time I read, you know, books by Black authors that were published, you know, years ago, I'm always just kind of like, wow, a lot of this is still so relevant. And it really is, which, you know, is sad.
It's sad. Yeah. A lot of the, like, oppressive shit that they bring up.
Yeah. And the, like...
It's still oppressive.
Yeah, like, there's, you know, a part in this book where these guys are trying to, like, take art or artifacts from museums in the U.S. specifically, but also, like, Europe and stuff, and return them to, like, the indigenous people that they were taken from, which is, like, still...
That's still a thing.
Still a thing. Also, I thought, like, it was just kind of interesting because, like, I had just recently heard online somewhere someone say that, like, Pablo Picasso's work was that he basically, like, copied African art.
Right.
And I was like, oh, I'd never heard that before, but, like, yeah.
Makes
I
sense.
definitely see that.
Yep.
Like, and they say that in this book.
You're like, oh, wow, it's been
I was
a
like,
thing.
wow, and people have known that for a really long
It's been a thing
time.
for a long time.
Yeah, so.
Hello, white ignorance.
Right.
Yeah.
But, yeah, I do think this was really good, but like I said, I just feel like I didn't fully understand it,
That's
which,
fair.
you know, is my fault. So it might be something that, like, would deserve a reread for me later, and maybe I'd be able, on a second read, to, like,
Pick up on some of the
more of it. So I think I gave it 3.5 stars. And I counted it for Tome Infinity. I know I counted it for Read a Classic sci-fi, and this is, like, very vaguely sci-fi, but, you know, it's about a plague.
It's
so.
sci-fi.
But Read a Classic and I think Read a Standalone were the two things I counted it for. And I didn't count the deed for anything, because I've been for the refund that shall not be named.
Right. So the last book that I'm going to talk about is Hottest Blood, edited by Jeff Gelb and Michael Garrett, which is the third book in a series of collections of horror erotica short stories. So I love Hot Blood. There was some really fun, really gross, goofy stories in it. This collection really fell short on both the erotica factor and the horror factor. It was less erotic and it was less scary. It was also infinitely more problematic. For some reason, like, there was a lot of stuff about trans folks in here, and, like, it was not real flattering to trans folks. Like, it was kind of shitty to trans folks. There was also, like, a really weird story in here where a woman basically hired another woman to sleep with her ex and give him AIDS because the woman she hired, like, had AIDS. So, like, there's some really problematic shit in here. Some of these stories are just, like, made me real uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Now, there were a couple of stories that I thought were entertaining, that were less problematic or not problematic. One of them was, like, the most depressing version of The Little Mermaid I've ever read in my life, like, more than the original.
Yeah, like, the original Little Mermaid's pretty fucking depressing.
Hill Betties was fun. So yeah, like, there were a few decent stories in here, but yeah, there were some that were just, like, pretty shitty to trans folks and to gay folks. I gave this 2 stars. I was very disappointed because, like I said, I did really dig Hotter Blood. It was a lot of fun. This was less fun. Yeah, so I did not count this for anything for Tome Infinity or for Fuckathon, so.
Alright, so that concludes our July wrap-up.
Part 3.
We both fucking killed it this month.
We did kill it. I don't think I've ever had a month where I read 13 books.
I don't know if I have either. Yeah, so we really rocked it.
We did.
Out of the park.
We did.
Did that make sense? I feel like I mixed my metaphors there.
We rocked it like a hurricane.
We did. And this fuck COVID beer, like, it's alright. I feel like, you know, if you want to get it for like the novelty of the
Of
name,
drinking a beer that says
it's
fuck
drinkable.
COVID. It's
Yeah.
drinkable, but it's not great.
but it's not great.
That's what we did. If you've read any of the books that we talked about, let us know. Let us know what you thought. We'd like to hear it.
Yeah.
And yeah, I guess we'll see you next time.
Yeah. Bye.
Bye. Thanks for watching.